So, what can I do for you tonight, Alicia? In terms of ground rules, I use condoms for strap ons and dental dams for rimming and cunnilingus.
All right, everybody, we are back on Play Forward. We are here today with two lovely filmmakers who I am very happy to meet with today and very interested in talking to about their film. They are Grace McLeod, and she is a writer producer. She wrote the film Double Date, and Hannah Wolf, director producer. She directed the film Double Date. Thank you both for being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
I'm happy to be here.
Definitely a pleasure. Good. I'm glad you are happy to be here. That is makes for better than depressed people. Although depressed people are by all means welcome on Play It Forward, and all feelings are welcome. Um, can you guys introduce yourselves just briefly as you'd like, please?
Yeah, go for it, Grace.
Yeah, I'm Grace McLeod. I am a playwright as well as a screenwriter. And I'm just happy to be here talking about this short film that I wrote and we made. But yes,
Awesome.
a writer of all the things.
Okay. Good to know about the playwriting.
Mhm. And I'm Hannah Wolf. I am a theater director and new film director, and working mostly with playwrights and screenwriters from the script through
Awesome.
production, through the product.
So fun. Theater's a great background. I first got into filmmaking trying to get into theater, and I was just like, oh, wait, this is never going to happen. Let me try film. So that was my background. And it's cool, like having, I think, the opportunity of like working with actors on the stage and then putting it in a set is just something nice there that's a good kind of context and background. Double Date. Who wants to start with a storyline?
Uh,
You want to,
yeah,
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 you got
sure.
it. Take it away.
This
Well,
story, oh,
yeah, I was going to say we can both do it in terms of, it's interesting to get the writer's perspective in the storyline and then director's perspective for the vision. So we'll start with you, Hannah, and see
okay.
where we go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the story of Double Date is, well, Grace and I had been sort of collaborating for a while, just wanting to make something together in a quick and low stakes process. And so we had been like pitching ideas back and forth, because we're both queer women or queer folks, queer people. And we were really interested in like, how do you expand the story of coming out beyond trauma? What is it to look at coming out through a middle-aged lens with and like where can we have some fun around it rather than, be in the very serious story that sometimes that storyline can hold. And so Grace, I think you had been like exploring Reddit threads, right? Of like middle-aged women,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, so I went down a Reddit rabbit hole. I will say initially, I sort of I found my way into that rabbit hole initially because I wanted to write something that was about, sort of coming out. And I also, like, did not come out in middle age. I came out relatively very early. I came out when I was like 16. But I've always been like an A student. That's just like who I am in my core. I've always really wanted to do things the right way, do them well, A plus. And like when I came out at that time early in life, I was like, well, how do I be a lesbian the right way? How do I do this? Well, like I've made this huge declaration to everyone, and like now I gotta follow through. I gotta do it, I gotta be a lesbian, and I don't know how. So I did a lot of research back then, which was basically just me like binging the L Word on Netflix in the dead of night, under my covers. But that was sort of the spirit that I brought into this, and then sort of looking at coming out at a very different time in life, about like a middle-aged woman who, is going through this great transformation and really wants to do it well and is afraid that she is going to fail. Um, and through that, I sort of found my way into this part of the internet, where, apparently it is very much a thing that people do, hiring sex workers, for obviously many different reasons. But a lot of women who, are coming out for the first time. I feel like we don't usually talk about how sex workers can be a part of that story. So I was very intrigued by this and wanted to delve into it and write the short.
Thank you both so much. That's a great intro. I love it from the practical side, Hannah, in terms of like, hey, let's make something and let's do it low stakes. I think that's a great way to put it. And, just keep sharpening the saw and learning and learning and learning. And the subject matter, I love how you have the perfectionist slant on being who you are and how do you do that to, your best ability, but also like how do you do it in a way where you have the sense of an identity that you're taking on, but you're not really sure what it means socially, and you want to like nail it. And it's a nuanced place. I will say, as a middle-aged man, I've heard of these things happening to people that I know well, and it's a really interesting psychological place to be. And I think you've really captured the motivation well. Um, and there's a lot to talk about. So great setup with that. You've already mentioned a little bit or a lot, Grace, in terms of like where did this project live in you and in your core, and it was very much particular to who you are as a person, just getting it right. And that's so much pressure to put on yourself. That's a not easy. Of course, you do well, and there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's also a lot of tension held in one's body, and you show it perfectly in this kind of situation. It's like this heightened version of sexuality where it's like it's really, you want to get loose and relaxed, and this is like the antithesis to that, this person who's like the perfectionist and trying to loosen up, and you guys have fun with the story. It's really cool, and in that way it is transcendent, and it's not just about, well, a lesbian coming out at 40, but it's really about this person who's seeking happiness and feeling like this is my last chance at being who I am. It's so hard to hide. If we hide as people anything, even lies, little white lies, they kind of they pinch a little bit. And so when we're hiding such a big part of ourselves, it's like it's so hard to, and accepting yourself, whether it's a lesbian or as a perfectionist, right? Like, how do you accept who you are without having to force yourself into being something else? So that's a universal story. So with that, Hannah, I'm going to kind of put it on you a little bit. Where did this story live in you, in your experience as a person, and how did you relate to it and get inspired?
Yeah, I mean, Grace and I had many conversations about that first time is such a high stakes situation. In the queer community. I definitely came out a little later and after Grace, and I think there's so much pressure right now
Now, are you
to
saying
know
first time of coming out or first sexual experience?
the first time you have sex.
Okay.
Yeah. And the first time you have queer sex, right? And like there universally there's so much pressure on that, but I think an older person having this new experience, to be an older person in life where you're supposed to like quote unquote be an expert on it, and what is it to put yourself in the novice seat, is really hard. And I think it's I look at some of my friends who are going through this experience, like leaving their first marriage and exploring who they are later in life, and it takes so much bravery, and it takes so much vulnerability to let yourself explore in that way. And so I think Grace and I were in a lot of conversations about like who are people we know in our lives going through this, what is our own experience, right? And what is our own experience in the queer community, like feeling like you have to know you have to know everything about yourself
You gotta
before
be good.
you got to be good. You have to know everything about yourself before you enter that community. And like, how do you name yourself in those spaces? And so what is it to look at a person who like desperately wants to be part of it, but doesn't know how? And what is sort of that middle space before she like goes out in public? And so this, we had a ton of like really fun conversations about what is it for that person, how do they sit in this area, and then how do we bring ourselves, you know, as also a recovering perfectionist day by
Mm,
day.
mm, mm. So, yeah.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
recovery.